This is topic 14-7, solving quadratic equations by factoring, day 2. Our essential question today is how can I solve quadratic equations using factoring? Our bell work is a review problem. What is the slope of a line that contains the coordinate points 8, -3, and -2, 7? There are a couple ways that you can do this. One is you can put these two points into stat in your calculator into the L1 and L2, where your x coordinates go in L1 and your y coordinates go in L2. Then you can do a linear regression, and when you do the linear regression, it will give you the information in the form of y equals ax plus b, and it'll tell you what a is, and it'll tell you what b is. And so using the calculator, knowing that a is the slope, will help you find the answer using the calculator. However, they give us a grid, so I'm going to go ahead and plot the points and actually calculate the slope using the plots. So the points are 8, -3, so on the x-axis, or start at the origin, 8 goes in our x direction, so it's positive 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we go down 3 in the y direction, 1, 2, 3, and here's our first point. -2, 7, start at the origin, x is negative, so we go to the left, 1, 2, and then the y is positive, so we go up 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and here's our second point. So to find the slope, we are seeing when we connect these two lines, we will see what's going on with the line itself. You see the line is decreasing, so that definitely tells us that the slope is negative, and all of our answers has a negative slope. So I'm going to calculate. When we talk about slope, slope is how it changes in y over how it changes in x, or how does it go up or down compared to how it goes left or right. We already know it's negative, so let's find out how far we have to go down in order to get to our second point. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Have to go 10 down, and now left or right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10 to the right. When I simplify this, -10 over 10 is a -1. So our answer is A. If you did it on the calculator, your equation would have come out to be, the A value would have said -1, and that would have been your slope. Here are the answers to assignment 14-6. You may pause the video if you want to check your answers. So our first question asks us to list the 4 steps to solve the quadratic equation. These are the 4 steps that we left on our summary yesterday in 14-6. So the first step is we have to have the equation set equal to 0. That means we're looking at the quadratic equation in standard form. It's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and that must be equal to 0. Our second step was that you have to factor that equation completely. Third step was to set each factor equal to 0. And then our last step was to solve for the variable. So when we factor completely, I'm going back to step 2, we're taking that quadratic and making it look like a product. So we have a product that's equal to 0. So let's use those in order to solve our equation. Our first example, we have x squared equals 18x minus 81. So our first step is to set the equation equal to 0. Well, I have an x squared already on one side. I want to get everything else over there. So that means I want my right-hand side to be equal to 0. I need these two things to come out equal to 0. So we're going to do the opposite of what it has there. I have a positive 18x, so I'm going to do the opposite and make it negative 18x. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. because when I add the positive 18 and negative 18, it will be equal 0. I also have a negative or minus 81. Do the opposite, we'll do plus 81. So if I add plus 81 on the right, I have to add plus 81 on the left. So our first step then was to get it equal to 0. Our new equation then is x squared minus 18x plus 81. That's my left-hand side, what I have here. Right-hand side, 18x minus 18x, that's 0. Negative 81 plus a positive 81, that is 0. So sure enough, we got 0 on the right-hand side. We've taken care of our first step. Second step says to factor completely. To factor completely, we have to start off with our s and our p. The sum of the equation that we now have above is the negative 18. It's the number in front of the x. The product, we take the number in front of the x squared, which is 1, times our constant, or 81, that's at the end, and we get a positive 81. We're now going to determine what two numbers will add to give you negative 18, but multiply to give you 81. And I'm going to use the calculator, remind you how it's used, and I'll do it this time, and then on the others you'll have to work it yourself. So on the calculator, we're going to do y1. We put in our product, so this will be 81 divided by x. And y2, we're going to do our product, which again is 81 divided by x, and then plus x. The goal is we'll get our 3 columns, and in our 3 columns, we're going to look for the sum in the y2 column because that is the one that's adding. So we need to find negative 18 in the y2 column. Let's get our calculators. So with our calculators, we'll hit the y equals, and y1, we'll do 81 divided by x, and y2, do the exact same thing, 81 divided by x plus x. We'll go to second graph to get to the table, and we want to find a negative 18 in our y2 column. So I look at my y2 column and I see 82, 42, 30. Okay, that's going down, decreasing, so I want to continue to decrease until I get to negative 18. Haven't gotten to negative 18. Looks like I went the wrong way. Let's see if I can get negatives here. There we go. Up top, there are my negative numbers. One of the things I need to also verify with you is that if in order to scroll up and down, you must be in the X column. If I try and scroll, I can scroll down in the Y columns, but I cannot scroll up. So in order to scroll up, you need to be in the X columns. Okay, I see my negative 18, and that tells me my two numbers are negative 9 and negative 9. Since those are my two numbers, we set up our fraction. So negative 9 is on the bottom, and our number that's on top is the number in front of the x squared. There's not a number shown. That number is 1. I cannot reduce those fractions any further, so we'll take the fractions and use them to write our factors. I know I have an x there because our variable is an x. It's still equal to 0. The number on top goes in front of the x. Number on bottom goes behind the x. Number on top goes in front of the x. Number on bottom goes behind the x. So I have factored it completely. Our third step then is to set each factor equal to 0. So our first factor is the x minus 9. We're going to set it equal to 0. Our second factor is x minus 9. We set it equal to 0. Our fourth step is to solve. So let's solve. Draw our line down the equal sign, box the variable. Get rid of the number that's not in the box. It's a minus 9, which means we have to add 9 in order to move it. We have an x by itself, and minus or negative 9 plus 9 is 0, and on the other side 0 plus 9 is 9. So one of our answers is 9. Do the other side, box our variable. We're going to add 9 to both sides. That leaves us with x on the left, and 0 plus 9 is 9. This is a case where we have the same answer, and it is okay to have the same number as your answer. And so our answer is x equals 9 and x equals 9. And if we were to take that 9 and plug it back into our equation, you would see that it does come out to be equal to 0. So I'm going to show it to you on this one. This would be 9 squared minus 18 times 9 plus 81. I'm going to type that in my calculator and see what it comes out to be. See if it comes out to be 0. So if 9 squared minus 18 parentheses 9 plus 81, and let's let me get that 1, press enter, and we should get 0. Sure enough, it shows. When I plug in a 9, my equation comes out to be equal to 0. So that is a solution to the quadratic. Let's continue to work on some more. This next one has negative 1 equals 3n minus 10n squared. So again, we need to make sure that we get our equation equal to 0. So to get our equation equal to 0, I'm going to add one thing here. When we set the equation equal to 0, we want the squared term, and I'm going to say x squared in general, to be positive. That is going to help you figure out which way to move. So let's look. We have our equal sign here. Find our x squared, or squared term. In this case, it's the n squared, and it is negative. We want it to be positive, so sure enough, we want it to move to the other side. We also want the 3n to move to the other side in order for this side on the right to be equal to 0. So in order to do that, let's look at the numbers and see what we have to add or subtract to make it equal to 0. I have a positive 3n, so we're going to do the opposite of positive. That's negative, so we're going to subtract 3n from both sides, because whatever I do to one side of the line, I must do to the other. You will see 3n minus 3n, yes, that equals 0. I now have a negative n squared, negative 10n squared, so the opposite would be positive 10n squared. Again, if I'm adding on the right-hand side, I need to add to the left-hand side. Negative 10 plus 10, they will cancel each other out. So on my left-hand side, I like to put the squared term first, so we'll have a 10n squared, then minus 3n minus 1 equal to 0. And our first step. Step 2, let's factor. Factor completely, so s is a negative 3. The product is a positive 10 times a negative 1, which gives us negative 10. Two numbers that will multiply to give you negative 10 but add to give you negative 3. I can come up with those. That'll be a negative 5 and a positive 2. If you cannot come up with those, you may use the calculator. Using these numbers, they will now go in the denominator of our fraction for us to factor. It's negative 5, positive 2. The top number is going to be the number in front of the squared term, so 10. Let's simplify. Our first one, we see that the fraction has a negative, so I'm going to go ahead and move the negative to the bottom, and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. And then we'll type in our fraction, 10 divided by 5. And let's just say you didn't think to keep the negative and not worry about it, so I'm going to show what happens. When you do 10 divided by negative 5, we get a negative 2. First off, it's a whole number. I need it to look like a fraction. So if I need it to look like a fraction, the negative 2, anytime I have a whole number and I want it to look like a fraction, I just take that number and put it over 1. The deal is, though, the negative, we started off with the negative in the denominator, so when we write it for our factoring purposes, the negative will be shown in the denominator. So this becomes 2 over negative 1. Now 10 divided by 2, again using my calculator, 10 divided by 2, math, enter, enter. Okay, it's a whole number 5. That means we're going to have 5 over 1. Take these fractions and they're going to help us write our factors. So we have 2n minus 1 times 5n plus 1. Again, the number on top goes in front, the number on bottom goes behind the variable. And then that is equal to 0. Step 2 is done. Step 3 says take these factors and set them equal to 0. So we'll take the 2n minus 1, set it equal to 0. We'll do the 5n plus 1, set it equal to 0. Last step says to solve. So we're going to solve, draw a line down the equal sign, box our variable. To get rid of the minus 1, we add 1, because negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 0 plus 1 is going to give us a positive 1. We still have a 2n inside the box. Get rid of the number in the box by dividing, so we'll divide both sides by 2, and that leaves us with n equals 1 divided by 2, or 1/2. The second factor is 5n plus 1. Draw a line, box the variable. We'll subtract 1 from both sides. We have 5n still within the box that's left. And then positive 1 minus 1 is 0, and 0 minus 1 is a negative 1. To get rid of the number in the box, we're going to divide. We divide by 5, and it gives us n equals a negative 1/5. Here are our two solutions. Number 3 is 16x squared equals 25. Again, first thing we want to is it needs to be equal to 0. Let's look at our squared term. It is already positive, so that means it stays where it is, and we're going to move the 25. In moving the 25, we have to subtract 25 from both sides. And so our equation becomes 16x squared minus 25 equal to 0. Because on our right-hand side, 25 minus 25 would be 0. Second step, let's factor. We have our s. What's the sum? Notice we do not have an x. So since there is no x, our sum, the number has to be 0. Product, we take the number in front of the x squared and our constant, which is negative 25, and multiply them. Negative 16 times 16 times negative 25 is a negative 400. Now I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me negative 400 but add to give me 0. I'll remind you, you can use the calculator and type in negative 400 divided by x, and then your y2, negative 400 divided by x plus x. When you look into your table, you'll have 3 columns, and you want to look for 0 in the y2 column, and that will give you your two factors. These two factors will be positive 20 and a negative 20. Once you have your factors, let's set up our fractions. So our fractions are, we have a positive 20 on the bottom, and we have a negative 20 on bottom. We have 16 on top. That's the number in front of the x squared. So our 16 over 20, using our calculator to reduce that fraction, 16 divided by 20, math, enter, and the fraction reduces to 4/5. And then 16 over negative 20, we have a negative in the bottom, and then the numbers stay the same. So it's a 4 negative 5. So our two fractions, we'll use that to rewrite our equation in factored form. Again, in factored form, it's equal to 0. A variable is x. The top number goes in front, bottom number goes after the x. So since it's positive, it's plus 5. Our second fraction, top number goes in front of the x, bottom number goes after the x. It is minus 5. We'll take our factors and equal to 0. So 4x plus 5 equals 0, and 4x minus 5 equal to 0. That's our step 3. Set them equal. And now let's solve. Draw a line, box the variable. To get rid of the plus 5, we're going to subtract 5. That leaves us with 4x equals a negative 5. The 4x is still in the box, so to get rid of the number that's in the box, we're going to divide. It's 4 times x, so we do the opposite. So we divide both sides by 4. That leaves us with x equals a negative 5/4. Look at our second factor. Draw a line and box the variable. We're going to add 5 now to both sides to get rid of the minus 5. Negative 5 plus 5 is 0. We still have a 4x in the box. And 0 plus 5 is a positive 5. Now we want to get rid of the number in the box. That means we must divide. We divide by 4. 4's cancel. We're left with the x. It equals to 5/4. So our two answers is x equals a negative 5/4 and x equals a positive 5/4. This is the solution to our quadratic. Number 4. Again, we want to set our equation equal to 0. So let's look and see and find our x squared value. Notice our x squared value is negative. We want it to be positive. So we need to move it to the other side. In order to make it positive, we're going to move it to the other side. That means we also need to move the other thing that's with it to the other side. So to get rid of the negative 2x, let me rephrase. What our goal then is to get the left side now equal to 0, and our right side is going to be our equation. That will have our equation that will have an x squared, it'll have an x, and it'll have this constant of 30 because that stays on the right side, so we'll have a plus 30. So to move the x, it's a negative 22. We do the opposite of negative. That's positive 22x, so we're going to add 22x. That means our x, the number in front of the x, is a positive 22. It's on the right-hand side now. And sure enough, negative 22x plus a positive 22x equals 0. So now negative 4x squared, we want it to be a positive 4x squared, or do the opposite. So we're going to add 4x squared here also. And a negative 4x squared plus 4x squared, that does become 0. And so we get a positive 4x squared. So positive 4 in front of the x squared. So notice how we have 0 equals 4x squared plus 22x plus 30. And as long as the x squared is positive, it does not matter which side of the equation that it is on. So we do have our equation equal to 0. We can now, this is our first step. Second step says to factor. So we need our sum. Our sum is 22. Our product, we take 4 times 30. 4 times 30 is 120. We need two numbers that'll multiply to give you 22, but add to give you 120. That'll be 12 and 10. 12 times 10 is 120. 12 plus 10 is 22. Those are the numbers that go in our fraction and the denominator. The numerator is going to be the 4. Let's use our calculator to reduce those fractions. So 4 divided by 12, math, enter, enter. Gives us 1/3. And then 4 divided by 10, math, enter, enter, gives us 2/5. So our two fractions are the 1/3 and the 2/5. We're going to rewrite our equation as factors. Both have x's. That's the variable we're using. Still equal to 0. Number in front, or number on top goes in front of the x. Number in the denominator goes behind the x, so plus 3. Number on top goes in front of the x. Number on bottom goes behind the x. That's a positive 5. Step 3 says to take these factors and set them equal to 0. So we'll do the x plus 3. Set it equal to 0. And we'll do the 2x plus 5 and set it equal to 0. So here's our step 3. Step 4 says to solve. Draw a line, box our variable. Subtract 3 from both sides. We have x already by itself. Positive 3 minus 3 is 0. 0 minus 3 is a negative 3. Our second factor, 2x plus 5, box our variable, draw a line. Get rid of the number not in the box. So we'll subtract 5 from both sides. We still have a 2x inside the box. Positive 5 minus 5 is 0. 0 minus 5 is a negative 5. Divide by the number in the box. We'll divide both sides by 2. So the 2's are gone. That leaves an x on the left and a negative 5 divided by 2 on the right. We have our two solutions. Our last problem, again, is a word problem. So remember what word problems you have to remember to answer the question. They're giving us the equation of the area of a rectangular room and asking us to find L. So again, we're solving for that variable. So the first step is we need to get this equation set equal to 0. Looking at our squared variable, it is already positive, so that tells us it's the 12 that needs to move to the other side. So we need to get the right-hand side equal to 0. Therefore, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides. And subtracting 12 from both sides, the right-hand side, 12 minus 12 equals 0, which is what we wanted. The left-hand side, we still have 2L squared minus 5L minus 12. So we have done our first step. Second step says to factor. So we'll look for our S and our P. Our sum is our negative 5. Our product is 2 times negative 12, or negative 24. Need two numbers that will multiply to give you negative 24, but add to give you negative 5. If you cannot think of it immediately, use your calculator. That's going to be a negative 8 and a positive 3. Because negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. Negative 8 plus 3 is a negative 5. We'll put those in our denominator. It's a negative 8, positive 3. In the numerator, we have a 2. See if we can reduce 2 over negative 8. This is going to be a negative 1/4, and the negative always goes in the bottom. The 2/3 does not reduce, so we're going to keep it as just the 2/3. Using those fractions, let us rewrite our quadratic in factored form. Our variable now is a L. So top number goes in front of the L, bottom number goes after the L. Second fraction, top number in front of the L, bottom number behind the L. Since it's positive, we put a plus. Third step is take those factors and set them equal to 0. L minus 4 equals 0. 2L plus 3 equals 0. The last step is to solve. So draw a line, box our variable. Get rid of the number not in the box. We're going to add 4 to get rid of that number. L is already by itself. Negative 4 plus 4 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4. It's one of our solutions. Let's look at the next one. Box our variable. Draw a line. Get rid of the number not in the box. It's a plus 3, so we do minus 3. Plus 3 minus 3 is 0. We're still left with 2L in the box. 0 minus 3 on the right-hand side is a negative 3. Get rid of the number in the box by dividing both sides by 2. This leaves us with L is a negative 3/2. Now let's answer the question. Find the length. We are finding the length of a room. So if I'm in a rectangular room, the length cannot be negative. Therefore, the length is 4. So our summary is, how does today's topic differ than yesterday's topic when describing how you solve the quadratic equations? Notice we did the exact same thing as we did before. We still had the same 4 steps, except in our first step, where we said set the equation equal to 0, we now said we want to make sure the squared term, so that'll be the x squared or y squared or whatever variable we're using. So make sure that term is positive. That will determine what moves, because if the x squared is already positive, the other numbers will move. If the x squared is negative, then we have to move the x squared. All the other steps will stay the same. This concludes topic 14.7.